Hello everybody, welcome back to JayEmm Friends. Only today, it's JayEmm and no friends, because in this episode it's just me and my Ferrari F12. This is part 2 of the F12 Service extravaganza. Yep, running these cars is so expensive, you can't talk about it all in just one video. In the first installment, I took this car over to Meridian Modena, who've been working on it for the last few months. I discussed how it is about 6 months after having to choose between one of these and a 430 Scuderia. I now own both, what it's been like, how it's met my expectations, the things that have gone wrong, and what needed doing. Today, the bit I know you're all waiting for. How much has it actually cost me? Well, all of that after these important messages. What do you mean there's no important messages? Oh, I like those. I suppose it's the second channel, we haven't got any sponsors yet. If you'd like to sponsor us, please let me know. Have we got a title card? Can we do that? Well, that's cheap. Who did that? Oh, it was me. To recap then, what did the car require? First off was a service. It was only due a minor. Guy, the previous owner, had done a major. That was about 1,600 quid. This is a lot less. It's only an oil, filter and pollen filter change with a complete check over of the car. It also required some tyres at the rear, and I had a short list of other stuff to get sorted as well. That included some noises I didn't like, so a squeaking from the front that we suspected was anti-roll bar bushings, and some creaks inside from the dash and also the door card. In terms of noise, there was actually one I did want a bit more of, and that's the exhaust. So I bought an exhaust valve controller from Forza Componenti and also supplied that with the car to be fitted. In terms of actual faults, there weren't all that many. One was a hot start issue that I've been experiencing, which in fairness really was only a problem when filling up. If the car was nice and warm, you stopped for about a minute, then started it, it would be very slow to crank, though it would always start and occasionally give you a few error messages. We suspected that we knew what that was, a cable from the starter motor to the battery, and the other issue was the brake ducts at the front. A lot of people have commented on them and think it's the result of some terrible spray job. Actually, it's quite the opposite. What happens with these cars at the factory is the whole front bumper is sprayed in body colour, then the black laid on top. So what looks like overspray is actually the paint underneath coming through when stone chips occur. Now, as you can probably tell, I haven't actually tended to that particular issue because the main problem wasn't a cosmetic one, it was mechanical. Those ducts are seized shut. Their purpose in life is to open when required to give the brakes extra cooling and then be closed the rest of the time for improved aero efficiency. However, with this car, like I'm told many other F12s, they just don't work anymore. The fact is, it actually took more than 5,500 miles of driving in this car before it reached a scenario where it felt it actually required that extra cooling. And that was on track. So on the one hand, it wasn't really a problem at all. I could drive this car normally and not really suffer anything from it. But when it comes to the brakes in a 200 plus mile an hour, 740 horsepower car, you really do want them to work, don't you? And as every time I started the car, it reminded me that the brake cooling ducts were inoperable, that was something I wanted to get sorted. What was actually bugging me more was the dashboard. This little topper here that I've taken to calling the Stingray on account of its shape had shrunk and was revealing a light-coloured piece of foam below. This is a common Ferrari issue. Everything gets to about 10 years and then needs the leather tending to. No, it isn't good enough, and it did bug the hell out of me, so that I did want done. I also found on the day I dropped the car off that the parcel shelf had, well, wilted. I opened the boot and all the fabric had just come away from it. No doubt as a result of the extreme heat that we've been experiencing in the lead up to this car being dropped off. The car was away in all for about 3 months. In that time, the 550 made its triumphant return. So when this came back, it was finally able to meet its spiritual grandfather, or great-grandfather, depending on whether you count the 575 as a separate model. It was also the first time I was able to get all 3 of my Ferraris together, which was nice. Thank you for that, because without you, that's the sort of thing I wouldn't be able to say. All 3 have also recently received the Star treatment when photographer Rudolf van der Ven came over to shoot them, and a couple of other vehicles belonging to my fellow YouTubers. This is in aid of an upcoming book celebrating 50 years of supercars. Watching him work was fascinating, and when the book's released, I'll be sure to let you all know. For me, having my cars featured in this is an incredible honour, and I cannot wait to see the finished results. As it happens, as soon as I made it known that I'd got the F12, a lot of people were asking if that meant I was going to sell the 550, and that is absolutely not the case. Despite the shared lineage, the two are very different cars. Each have their own strengths and weaknesses, and I love them both. Luckily, in the last 2 weeks, I've been enjoying both of them as well. This car, even sat here now, is a towering piece of engineering. I love it. And the 550 is my first Ferrari, a real true classic. I really wouldn't want to have to choose between either of them. On the subject of the F12, which I know is why you're all here, it has been an excellent ownership proposition too. Aside from the already mentioned faults, nothing really has gone wrong with it, and it certainly hasn't left me stranded or ever made me think that it would. I've done over 6,000 miles in it now, actually closer to 7, took it up to Scotland where it was absolutely flawless and also rather gorgeous, and I really have loved every moment I've been behind the wheel of this car. Now, I think we can all relate to that feeling of dread you get when taking a new-to-you car to the dealership for the first time. Regardless of how long it's performed relatively flawlessly, there's always that nagging sensation that you've clearly been missing some really serious problems, and you're going to be met with more than a few unexpected surprises. Happily, the F12 didn't have all that many in store, but there were a few. So let's get on to the money bit, shall we? First off, wiper blades. The old ones were smearing, new ones £120. I approved that because, well, I like to see where I'm going, and as an aside, one of the things I really like about the F12 is that anybody who's owned an older performance car will know that it's basics like the wipers working that you don't often get, so for these to actually be brilliant really is quite novel. Secondly, an engine bay retaining trim bolt is missing, £6. After much deliberation, I also approved that. The windscreen washer bottle cover is loose and keeps falling off. I'd noticed that. It's annoying, a £93 part, but you know what? I hated it. I approved that as well. Power steering pipe bracket broken. Now that sounds very pricey, doesn't it? As it happens, parts £7.30. Parts are cheap, aren't they, James? It's the labour that gets you. No, 37 quid for that, so also approved. The brake pipes needed cleaning up and treating at the back. Meridian did that at no cost because they knew what was coming for me. There was also a very slight oil leak from the engine, so slight that really you would deem it a weep rather than a leak, and they recommended as best course of action simply to clean it up and keep an eye on it, and they'll check on it the next time they see it. The passenger door rattle, which I suspected, they said, we think we can sort it, give us about 2 or 3 hours of labour though, and also the glove box, that's going to be pricey to sort, but that's the source of the rattle here. They think they can also do that. Yes, it's going to be a lot of money, but it drove me nuts, so I said, okay, do it. Some of the coolant hose clamps are not quite as tight as they should be. They hadn't come loose, but they also weren't quite perfect. And as coolant hoses are kind of important, I said, yeah, let's do that. That's 200 quid, which is, yeah, expensive, but nowhere near as expensive, I think, as the result of if they were to fail. Then a piece of corrosion was spotted on the driver's door, only small at the moment, but I had seen that before and forgot, and that does need tending to at some point. I haven't had that done yet. Now, a lot of you probably think that I tend to give Ferrari more slack than I really should because, well, they're Ferrari, but don't worry, when they do things that I really think are unacceptable, I will pull them up on it. And case in point, the service light in these cars. Now, it's a very, very basic system. You take the car in for a service, they log it, and the car remembers. However, it's got memory for just 10 service resets. After that, you can't do it anymore, not easily. Anyway, what happens as a result of that? Well, nothing really. It just means the car doesn't tell you when it needs a service anymore. Hardly vital. To fix that and to bring the service computer back online is £560, which is daft. Not only is it an awful piece of design, why in this day and age can a computer have memory for just 10 dates in it? That's, what, a kilobyte or something daft, but to charge people so much is absolutely outrageous. Now, I believe part of this might be by design. I think the way that this system works is designed to counteract potential clocking issues. I know from experience with my Maserati that if the car's reset at a time and place that it doesn't expect, so you reset the service counter in 2010, 2011, and then 2009, it will just lock up and go, and basically fire off the signal flare to tell people something isn't quite right. Then you can investigate and see what's happened. Now, the Maserati is a car that in design terms is from the early 2000s, so the fact the computer's quite basic, I can nearly forgive. This is not. and the cost of resetting it is just daft. For a car which has always been serviced by Ferrari main dealers, I think when this needs doing, they should just do it on the house. All Ferraris now come with 7 years free servicing, and I think the reason they don't really care about that light is because once it's had its 7 years free servicing, it's probably only had about 7 or 8 services, so resetting that isn't their problem. I think as a gesture of goodwill, after you've had your last free service, Ferrari should reset that, so at least you've then got 10 going forwards, but that's been waffling, isn't it? Annoying though. Other things that stung a little bit, well, the oil filter, £97. 97! Though mercifully, there's only one here, unlike in the 550, which has 2. But they're quite a bit cheaper. There's also a lot of oil in this car, 1060, in case you're interested, and 15 litres of it. Yeah, that adds up quite quickly. But that wasn't my real concern. Instead, that was those brake ducts at the front. They were, as we suspected, seized, and the official procedure for that is to replace them at a cost of £5,300, which naturally I said no to for 3 reasons. First off, as already mentioned, unless you're on track, they don't seem to do all that much. Secondly, £5,300. Thirdly, I had an idea. You see, on occasion, I like to think of myself as a bit of a cut-price Tyrion Lannister. I don't drink, but I do know things. More specifically, I know people. All these things really do is open and close. That's it. It's not complicated, is it? And in my head, I couldn't stop thinking that there must be a way to fix that. Unless they're completely and totally destroyed, they must be salvageable. So I sent it off to a chap I met earlier in the year called Robin, who was the man that manual converted his own Ferrari 612 Scaglietti. So he's a person that knows Ferraris, both electrically and mechanically. The perfect person to be able to fix these, if anyone could. Meridian agreed that it would maybe be possible to sort them, and were happy to remove them and have them sent off to Robin. He got them, and like me, he assumed that these were probably another Italian, poorly made part, badly constructed, with low quality materials that had just disintegrated. Happily though, that turned out not to be the case. He got them, disassembled them, and found that actually they were very well engineered and constructed with brass gears and things internally. They simply had seized up because they'd gone all crusty after near 10 years of being constantly cleaned and then driven through all sorts of different weather. He took them apart, greased them up, a couple of bits did break in the disassembly process. He was able to 3D print some new ones, put it back together, refitted it. Hey presto, it worked. As it happens, they don't actually work in the way that I expected. It is a spring-loaded system with a little pin in it, so when the car sends a signal to open up the front, it just pops open like that. The electric motor internally only closes the ducts because it has to fight against the force of the spring. It's actually quite an elegant solution. The theory, I think, is that if they fail, they will fail open. I suppose to get you out of trouble if you're on track or the like, but here they just got stuck. This, as mentioned, is a common F12 problem, and thanks to Robin, rather than this costing about £5,000 and a bit, it costs closer to £1,000. And even better, we now have a potential solution for anybody out there with an F12 that's suffering from the same thing. So if you have that problem with your car, please send me an email, that's in the description down below, and I'll put you in touch with Robin, and hopefully we might be able to help you and also save a couple of quid, euros, dollars, lira, drachma, or just gold bullion, depending on where it is in the world that you are. So that was the big bit out of the way. What about the rest of it? Well, the service itself cost around £850. The prices quoted here, by the way, are all exclusive of VAT, which at the time of filming was 20% here in the UK. All in then, that meant the service itself was about £1,000, roughly half labour, half parts. The rattles, that was a painful one. I did want them done, and Meridian, to be fair to them, did tell me in advance how much it was likely to cost. As it happens, the total was a little bit less because they managed to solve it quicker than they feared. But between the door card and the dash, the labour total, £930. Parts, 73p. Yeah, it was one loose screw in the glove box causing most of the rattling. The anti-roll bar bushings were the source of the squeak at the front. They greased those up, that was sorted, about £155. Then the exhaust valve controller, that got fitted, 533 quid, which was more than I'd kind of hoped, but I have to say, does make a huge difference. The reason I wanted it really was actually for YouTube stuff, because with this car, like every other Ferrari, there is no way for the user to control the exhaust valve. Instead, the car does it however it wants to do it. And with a car this quick, trying to keep the valve open can be tricky. And that means on video you wind up with little sections that sound like this. However, now I can force the valves to be open all the time, meaning it sounds a little bit more like this. To say for me, that's pretty much perfect. Around town it now makes just a little bit more noise than it did before. It's not raucous, it's not distracting, it's not overbearing, it's really quite nice. And when you're out driving and just having a little bit of fun, you get a lovely little bit of extra burble on the downshifts. It's wonderful. This exhaust now is pretty much how I'd keep the car. The only thing I might change in future is perhaps fitting an X-pipe to the centre, but that's for another day. Sorting the parcel shelf at the back was another £125, quite reasonable I think. That was again a combination of labour and parts, some new fabric, a bit of glue, some clamps, some time. It was sorted. Maybe I could have done it myself, but I've seen what happens when I try and do trim pieces myself. It's not pretty, and nobody would buy a Ferrari with trim bits that I had done. Despite the fact it was all costing a little bit more than I'd hoped, the dashboard I still wanted done. That was £675, and the guy has done an excellent job. It looks exactly as from factory, despite the fact it's all new leather. Though frustratingly, I have now noticed that next to that, a little piece of the dash has started to lift. You barely notice it. In fact, in photographs, you can't really see it, but it is there and it is annoying me. It's going to be again a case of just gluing it back down, but no doubt the labour to get to that is going to be quite a bit. So for now, I'm just going to leave that. Tyres are another interesting one. For some reason, when I got this car, everybody was obsessed with asking me how much tyres cost. I've never had that with any other car, and I don't know why it is with this that people are asking. I don't really think they're that massive compared to lots of other stuff, but they're not really that expensive. The rears, which did only last about 7,000 miles, cost me £630 from Camskill. No special YouTuber discount, no nothing, that's just the price of them. Proper Ferrari K-rated tyres, 315 3520s, Pilot Sport 4S, in case you're interested. And if you wanted to do the whole car, you're looking at near enough £1,000. So those I don't really think are all that bad. In other good news, the TPMS, the tyre pressure monitoring system, is fine, still has plenty of life left in the batteries, apparently about 10 years worth. And that's good to know, because on my 430, the old grey one, that had been done by the dealer before I got the car. And that cost £800 to put new batteries in. The discs and pads here are also in very good condition, and the one bit I didn't have done, the hot start thing, I've left because that was 1,100 quid. So then, the final total for the F12's first visit to the dealer, including the tyres and everything, £5,700. It's quite a lot of money, isn't it? Now, if I was trying to run this car on a budget, I could have got the really essential stuff done for probably about 1,500 to 2 grand, but really, this is not the kind of car that you want to do that with, and handily, a lot of the stuff that I've had done, I'm not going to have to revisit at all. The next items on my list are going to be the cosmetic ones, so the little ducts at the front and the bumper, and the little bit of corrosion in the door here. I want to stamp on that ASAP. Beyond that, though, it's going to be back to simply enjoying my wonderful, lovely Ferrari F12. And once again, I want to say a big thank you to all of you for being a part of the journey, especially those that have tuned in to JayEmm Friends. And as ever, make sure you've hit that like button, commented down below, and also subscribed. At this stage in the channel's development, getting new subscribers on board is absolutely vital. And I want to say a particularly big thank you to everyone who's already hit that subscribe button, and a thank you in advance to the rest of you that I hope will do it shortly. I look forward to seeing you for the next installment of either JayEmm on Cars or JayEmm Friends, whichever it is. See you there. Bye-bye.